Good morning, everybody. It's early, it's dark, it's not as cold as it was, but it's still kind of cold. So we're worked up today to a 240, 240, yeah, 240. And we'll do a couple more sets here, maybe drop down and do a little bit less, do like a burnout at the end. Then we'll flip it around, do some axle overhead, sort of mixing like powerlifting and strongman together. And then we might do some other stuff. But what I really want to talk about is good news. My daughter's coming home today. That's the plan. So when she gets up, everything should still look good because we have faith in that. And she'll be on her way home this morning. So that'll be awesome. So we spent a lot of time last night making sure certain things in the house are ready. Christmas decorations are down so that, we can get busy on that, like after work and stuff. But right now, let's do some work right here on this workbench. So let's see if we can't get 5 right now. All right, that was not the prettiest in the world. That's weird how that works sometimes. First set will be the worst, or the second set will be the worst, whatever. The first set actually felt better. So, I don't know. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't matter. Just go through the process, go through the steps. So, we're talking about faith a lot lately because, it's a topic that comes up all the time, right? Especially when people are going through stuff. And what is your faith, going to do in that situation? Or what are you going to do with your faith? Maybe is a better way of saying it. Because faith, as I understand it, is a gift. And like a lot of gifts, sometimes people get a gift and they throw it in the closet because maybe they just didn't want to mess with it right then or whatever. And then they forget about it. And then when they needed it, they forgot they had it. And so then they don't, they can't use it. It's stuck in that closet and they forgot about it. I wonder if faith is like that for a lot of people where, they know God gave it to them and then they kind of forgot about it. And, they really weren't that serious with God anyway. And so all of a sudden now we're talking, something happens and they start looking around for answers, somewhere else. And I'm not going to do that, right now because I know who my faith is in and I know, what has happened in the past, things I've been through. And Jesus has always gotten me through it, no matter how weird or unusual situations might have been. So why would I stop trusting in him just because, my daughter has cancer? So point is, let's back up all this stuff that I'm saying with some actual scripture, right? Because I feel like a lot of people like to just talk and say things that sound pretty good, but when you look at it through the lens of scripture, all of a sudden it begins to unravel a little bit, or, maybe it's half true. And to me, I'm pretty hardcore about the gym, and I'm pretty hardcore about everything, to be honest. So, thing is, to me, if you're telling me a half truth, you're just telling me a total lie, is the way I look at it. So James chapter 1 starts off a lot like 1 Peter chapter 1, and they're right next to each other in the New Testament. And they're both talking about being joyful, being thankful, and praising God when things happen, when life goes wrong. And they both tie it back to faith. They both tie it back to how your faith is going to grow, how you're going to mature spiritually because of faith, not any other words. They both specifically use faith right there. And I think that's interesting because if, we look at another verse that says, he that began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. You can kind of see how those things work together now, I hope. So your faith, because God is faithful, He started this in you, He's going to complete it in you. And so part of the growing and maturing process isn't always fun. Look, okay, I'm not going to lie. This is fun to me. I'm sorry. It just is. But for a lot of people, this is not fun. They're only doing it to get to what it's going to give them at the end. They don't enjoy the process the way I do. But they got I want that goal. I want the beach body, or I'm going to look good for my wedding, or I want to, compete and be good there, or whatever. I mean, yeah, I compete, but I also love the process. So if I wasn't competing, I'd worked out for 20 years without even knowing competing was even possible. I didn't, I guess just oblivious to how much fun stuff there was to do out there. But the point is, it's not fun going through stuff, and yet at the same time, if you don't go through stuff, you don't get better, you don't get stronger, you don't mature. So let's hit the third set, and while we think about that for a second, and go through some stuff to get somewhere, because if you don't, you just get stagnant. All right. That was a rough little ending there, but we did it. Oops. That was microphone noise. Scratchy, scratchy. So anyway, we're going to change some stuff off of here. Do what we call I don't know. Not really a pyramid. I don't know what it is. It's not really a drop set. Just taking some weight off and do some reps. Rep work, maybe, is the best way to say it. I don't know, whatever. So what do you think? James goes on to say that faith without work is dead. In other words, it's got to get work done. Faith isn't going to just grow itself. And that's hard. It's a hard thing to reconcile these days. Because we're so used to appearing like everything's free until we don't have to do anything. Free grace, free love, free faith. As if we're not required to do anything with these gifts that God gives us. And then you run the risk, of it turning into, I have to do this stuff so I'll get saved, or so I'll be saved, or so I'll stay saved. And that's not what they're talking about. You have to remember, when the Bible is explicit about something, then that's the way it is. And so any implicit thing you come across, you already know it doesn't mean certain things because of the explicit scriptures. So it doesn't mean that, because it's clear that we're saved by grace through faith, not because of works. But what are the works for? After you're saved, to validate your faith, prove it. You go out and live it, prove it. It's like teenagers. Teenagers, they don't listen to you if you're a parent. Or, well, any old person, right? Apparently I'm old. I mean, no one's really told me that in my face, but you can just kind of tell by the way people treat you. By the way kids talk to you. They must think I'm pretty old. So, but I'll tell you what, they might not listen to what you say, but they will watch what you do. And they'll base their decisions on what you do, not so much what you say anymore. So are you living a life that proves it? So what I'm doing is as much about, what I'm doing is really 100% about being obedient to Jesus. And then the fallout is it's showing my kids how to act in these situations, because, the other two are getting older. They're getting up in that age where they're thinking, college and marriage and jobs and houses. And so, who knows what they're going to run into down the road. Am I setting the right example of how to handle my business right now? So let's do some rep work. So that should be 205, which is still kind of heavy. All right, so that was pretty cool. $205 for 10 after my heavy working sets. That feels, it's a good thing, I guess. It's more than I weigh, right? So it's a decent amount more than I weigh. So we need to figure out a good word for this. We're just moving stuff. This is all like one camera, one light bulb action here. We don't have the big editing team. Oh yeah, got my. Need to back up. You'll never see if that's truly over my head or not. I might be over there, cheating reps on you. I don't know. That might work. So we're going to start over here with 75 pounds. Start going overhead, work up to about 150. Because, that's the thing, chaos, confusion. Those are the things that I guess you would say sort of mess with people's faith. The faith's easy when life's going great. But then are you really even using your faith at that point? you're just kind of in autopilot half the time, right? So the reality is, you almost don't know about your faith until you actually need to use it. So then you're maybe not sure you have it. That's a thought. So how do you know? How do you know you have faith? Well, I think it goes back to what James was talking about. We have work. So you're proving it. So you know you have it. So when you really need it, you already know it's there. Sound crazy? Think about like weightlifting. Okay, one time I did 195, exact number. I did 195 overhead. All right. So should I just walk away and say, all right, I can do 195, never do it again, and then come back a year later? No, I won't do 195, and then I'll be mad about it. I think that's kind of what happens sometimes with people's faith. They don't work it, and I'm not saying they lose it. It's not the same thing. You're losing your gains, right? But no, seriously, if you don't, exercise it, you don't work it, you don't do what you're supposed to do, it's just not going to be healthy. That's probably the best way to say it. So yeah, we're going to do some of this work. Yeah, that was not bad. So Axel OHP, because I don't feel like writing out overhead press. All right, so we're going to throw the big wheels on there. So that'll make it like 115, I guess. But yeah, that's, that was my kind of what I've been writing down and thinking about, talking about lately. A lot of faith stuff, for good reason. It's funny when you start really focusing on a certain thing in scripture like that. Two things happen, at least for me. One is that next thing I know, it's like it's just everywhere. It's just all over scripture. You know what I mean? You just can't not see it. You'll probably just reading anywhere in the Bible, and all of a sudden, especially the New Testament, something like faith, it's just everywhere. Jesus talks about it. All the apostles talk about it. So it's all over the Gospels. It's all over the epistles. And it's just everywhere. And then the other thing that happens is after you see it everywhere, you start realizing how consistent and how in agreement what everybody said about it. They're all essentially, well, I wouldn't say they're all saying the same thing. It's not an echo chamber. They're not a bunch of drones. But they're not saying anything that contradicts what anybody else says about it. Like a lot of people sort of pit James and Paul against each other sometimes. And if you read, you'll see clearly that's not the case. That might be a fun thing to talk about on Friday. Or maybe I'll just talk about it now, because it's on my mind. People think that Paul and James were in a disagreement about faith. And the reason people think that is because they're stupid. Yeah, there's no real technical, deep reason for it, other than people are stupid. If they actually read what Paul and James are saying, it's not hard to figure out. They're actually saying two different parts of the same thing. because Paul and James both reference Abraham and his faith, and how Paul is talking about where he's saved through faith, and James is talking about how his faith proved that he was saved. And they get the two confused and conflicted. But if you simply go back and read the quotes from the Old Testament that Paul uses and the quotes from the Old Testament that James uses, they're using two different parts of Abraham's story. And when you put them together, instead of thinking they're opposites, what you should do is realize how they complement each other so well to paint the full picture of Abraham and his faith in much more difficult circumstances, than what I'm dealing with right now. So that's what even makes it better, is you can always find somebody in Scripture that's going through something worse than you, maybe by just a few degrees, or maybe by a lot, and just get encouragement and strength from, their example and what, how they relied on God to get them through it. All right, 1:15, let's do it. Yeah, that worked pretty good. It's hard to do math here. It's so weird. It shouldn't be weird. It should be easy. 135, we'll do that next. Because mostly every bar is 45 pounds. Except this axle bar is not. Yeah, there we go. This axle bar isn't. And there's some squat bars that aren't, but we don't have any of those here. So every bar here is 45 pounds. Or every, full size length, whatever. So, except the axle bar. And obviously these little easy curl bars. I don't even know what some of those weigh. So yeah, there's the thoughts for the day. Faith. Live it, walk it. So, it's funny because this would be what it weighed if we were using a normal bar. So you got to put an extra 10 pounds on each side to get it up to the weight of a normal bar. The wild thing is everybody looks at a bar like this and thinks because it's bigger around, it must be heavier. It's not. So I guess if I don't tell you what I'm lifting, you would think it was a lot. All right. So, and I don't think anybody cares today what I'm doing on this, so we'll go ahead and wrap up the video. And I'm going to say what I always say, pretty much have a good day if you want to. Next time.